Hello, today we are starting chapter 7 and we are going to cover 7.1 ratio and proportion. Our learning target is I can write ratios and write and solve proportions. So we're going to jump in with vocab here. A ratio is a comparison of two quantities using division. The ratio of quantities A and B, or A to B, or A over B, where B is not equal to 0. Ratios are usually expressed in simplest form. Guys, the reason why B cannot equal 0 is because you'd basically be dividing by 0, which is not something you can do. So the aspect ratio, 32 to 18 and 16 to 9 are equivalent, because if you reduce 32 over 18, you get 16 to 9. So if you're thinking of like a TV, you often have this width of the screen, which would be 32, and the height of the screen, which would be 18, which would be a 16 to 9 ratio, which is pretty normal for a lot of TVs. And this, guys, we read as 16 to 9. So we're going to write and simplify ratios. The number of students who participate in sports programs at Central High School is 520. The total number of students in the school is 1,850. Find the athlete-to-student ratio to the nearest tenth. So often, guys, we don't write these as a decimal, but it is asking us to find this as a decimal. And also, order does matter. You'll notice it says athlete-to-student ratio, which means you need to put the number of athletes first, then the number of students. Now, if we were writing this as the ratio and not as a decimal, you would need to reduce this. So I'm going to go ahead and do that right now. This reduces only to 52 to 185. I'm going to show you guys a shortcut here. All right, so on Desmos, you can type in your ratio as a fraction, and it gives you this decimal answer here, which we will eventually use. But I want to show you that on Desmos, you can click this little fraction button here, and it will reduce your fraction for you. It just goes between fraction and decimal. Your blue calculators actually have a way to reduce fractions for you too. I'll have to show you that at a different time if you are interested. Anyway, I know that that reduces to 52 over 185, and that's as far as it goes. For our decimal, we're going to write this decimal out, and then we are going to round it to the nearest tenth, which is 1 decimal place. So this as a decimal is 0.281081, which is about, when rounded, 0.3. You guys go ahead and pause me and try the U-try. All right, here we go. The country with the longest school year in China is 251 days. Find the ratio of school days to total days in the school year for China to the nearest tenth. We're going to use 365 days. We're going to assume it's not a leap year when we solve. So, first of all, they do want us to find it to the tenth again. We can see if this will reduce any. 251 divided by 365. That does not reduce. That's as reduced as that fraction gets. So since we're finding it to the nearest tenth, oops, wrong one, we'll write down the decimal form rounded, which is 0.7. And I should say about. Remember, the squiggly equals means about. Now, guys, interestingly, we only go to school 180 days out of the school year, which is about half of the school year. So they are in school a lot more days than us. So I guess we should be thankful that we have less days to have to go to school. Oh, I also want to point out this ratio. I did school days to total days because the order does matter. All right, next thing, extended ratios. These can be used to compare 3 or more quantities. The expression A to B to C means that the ratio of the first two quantities, A to B, the ratio of the last two quantities, B to C, and the ratio of the first and last quantities, A to C. okay? So that means these are all within one ratio. They all work together. So we are going to use extended ratios. Guys, there will be questions like this on your quiz coming up and a test eventually. So the ratio of the measures of the angles, 5 to 12 to 13. Find the measure of the angles. It's in a triangle. Now, you're probably thinking, okay, well, 5 and 12 and 13, you can't add those up to equal 180. That is true, okay? So what you are going to do instead is you can think 5x plus 12x plus 13x equals 180. Basically, it's just a reduced version of the degrees that are in the triangle as a whole. So you'll combine like terms. You get 30x equals 180. And you'll divide and get that x is 6, just 6, not 60, my bad. Now, it doesn't want you to just find x, it actually wants you to find the measures of the angles. So, I'm going to say that this is angle E, and this is angle F, and this is angle G. In general, however you write this triangle is the order of how these letters are written out, or numbers are written out. So I'm going to solve for the measure of angle E. I'm just going to take 5 times 6. I get 30. Then the measure of angle F, 12 times 6. I get 60. Nope, I don't get 60. My mental math is not good today. I get 72. Then I take the measure of angle G, and I take 13 times 6, which is 78 degrees. If I do a quick check here, these three angles should add together and equal 180. And they do, so we're good here. So we have our measure of angle E, our measure of angle F, and our measure of angle G. Okay? Go ahead and pause me. Try the next one. This says the ratio of the angles of triangle ABC is 3 to 5 to 7. Find the measure of the angles. Don't forget how to solve these, guys. There's definitely a test and a quiz question over this. It's very important. So when you see this ratio, know that that's not the actual degrees. Can't be. Triangles have to add and equal 180. You have to figure out what will make that happen. So you set up your little equation, 3x plus 5x plus 7x equals 180. Combine like terms. And you get that x is 12. Once again, the order of this usually, if not always, matches the order of our ratio. So we have angle A, angle B, angle C. So I'm going to find the measure of angle A. It's 3 times 12, which is 36. The measure of angle B is 5 times 12, which is 60. And the measure of angle C is 7 times 12, which is 84. And once again, if you do add these up, you should get 180. And you can check me on that. You would indeed get 180. All right, so that's ratios. Now we're going to move on to proportions. So use properties of proportions. An equation stating that two ratios are equal is a proportion. In this proportion, A over B equals C over D. The numbers A and D are called extremes of the proportion, while the numbers B and C are called the means of the proportion. Guys, I don't really talk about them like this. Some interesting vocab for you, but don't worry too much about it. The product of the extremes, A times D, and the product of the means, B times C, are called cross products. So, guys, you can think of these as you need to cross multiply. Or some teachers use the term butterfly method. I'll probably talk about both of them. I'll switch back and forth between them. They mean the same thing, okay? So, cross product here. Cross product property. In a proportion, the product of the extremes equals the product of the means. You multiply on the diagonal. As long as b does not equal 0 and d does not equal 0, then these equal each other. So in this case, you take 4 times 15, 10 times 6, they both end up equaling 60. I will say, guys, this sort of like proportion setup is going to be a big thing that we're doing within the next 2 chapters. So make sure you truly understand how to set up and solve proportions. This isn't something that we're going to do briefly. It is review. I think I probably learned this in about 4th or 5th grade, but you do need to know how to do this really well. So I am going to cross multiply. Use the butterfly method. You simply just multiply. You take 6 times y and 18.2 times 9. So 6y stays. The 18.2 times 9 equals 163.8. And then the solving should be pretty simple. I'm hoping this chapter is pretty easy for us because there's a lot of this like cross-multiplying information. The next example does get a little trickier, but that's just because we have to distribute. We still are just cross-multiplying. So I'm going to take 6 times 4x minus 5 and 3 times negative 26. I need to distribute these 6 through. So I get 24x minus 30 equals, multiply on the other side, negative 78. And then we just solve for x. We get 24x minus 48. So x is equal to negative 2. All right, on the next page, there's a you try. Go ahead and pause me, and you guys try it. All right, this is another problem where we have to cross multiply. And then we are also going to have to distribute. So we have 2 times 7n minus 1 equals 8 times 15.5. We distribute. We get 14n minus 2 equals 124. I'm just looking at my notes here. You can take 8 times 15.5 in your calculator, okay? We add 2 to both sides. And then we divide by 14. So n is going to equal 9. And that's all it asks for, okay? Now, if we were to plug that back in, these fractions would have the same ratio, okay? If we were to make them a decimal, they'd be the same decimal. All right, now we're going to use proportions to do some figuring out of things in like a story problem context. So this says, Monique randomly surveyed 30 students from her class and found that 18 had a dog or a cat for a pet. If there are 870 students in her school, predict the total number of students with a cat or a dog. There actually are a ton of ways you can set this up. I'm just going to pick one of them. So I am going to pick the number of students with a cat or dog to the total. That just makes sense to me. And then if I want to estimate for the whole school, I'm trying to find the number of students with a cat or dog to the total number of students. So I have 2 different ratios set up here. I can put these into a proportion. 18 over 30 equals, I'm going to call it x instead of question mark, over 870. Notice this is students with cat or dog, and this is total students. Notice in these ratios that the bottom things match up type-wise and the top things match up type-wise. We could reverse these around a couple different ways and still have the exact same answer, but this is one way to do it. They match up. So now we're going to cross multiply to solve. I get 18 times 870 equals 30 times x. I went ahead and finished solving, and I get 522 people. This is the amount that is predicted to have a pet. Okay, you guys go ahead and try the U-Try. It says, Brittany randomly surveyed 50 students and found that 20 had a part-time job. If there are 810 students in Brittany's school, predict the total number of students with a part-time job. We can set this one up really similarly to the pets and total student situation. So we have 20 students have a part-time job. 50 were randomly surveyed. We want to know approximately how many would have a part-time job if there are 810 kids in the school. Once again, you have to kind of match things up. I have the number with job over the total students for both of these ratios. So I cross multiply, I end up with 50x is equal to 20 times 810. So 50x is equal to 16,200. We divide by 50. And x is equal to 324. This is the amount of students predicted to have a job. Now, like I said, there are actually quite a few ways that you could set this up and still be correct, which is shown down here. Equivalent proportions. The following proportions are all equivalent. So you could have A over B equals C over D. You could flip-flop these and have B over A equals D over C. Notice they are both flip-flopped. You could switch. You could have A over C equals B over D. And you could have C over A equals D over B. Notice no matter how you set this up when you cross multiply, you still get here that AD is equal to BC on all of these. So these are 4 different equivalent proportions. We could have set these up in 4 different ways as well. That means there are also other ways that you could set this up that are incorrect. So make sure, like I told you here, match up things however makes sense to you as long as they are matched up well, and you should be good to go. Okay? So sometimes it's a little trickier when you have a little bit more free range. There should be 4 correct ways to set up every single proportion you do. All right, if there is extra time, you guys can go ahead and flip one more page and try out some of the problems on the following worksheet. I'll see you soon. Bye.